Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Good Deeds Note Investing Podcast. This is Open Mic Night, and I am here with Open Chris Seveny, my co-host. I am Gail Anthony Greenberg, here to welcome everybody to another contemplation of the note business.
Hello, Gail. How are you?
Very well, Chris. We just were talking about Halloween. People
Yes.
always watch these at different times, so, I love to kind of anchor it in reality once in a while by saying like what the day actually is. It's actually my anniversary tonight, but I'm here with you guys because you are my special people. So.
Well, first, happy anniversary.
Thank you. And your anniversary was just a few days ago. So
Yes,
we
mine
have
was.
yet another thing in common.
Yeah, mine was Sunday. So, as I mentioned, our daughter picked our wedding date actually, and it's a interesting story, but I won't say it here. But anyone ever has a drink with me, it's a pretty interesting story.
Yeah, we had to pick our date around the Jewish holidays, and basically it boiled to once we eliminated all the Jewish holidays and other times when people couldn't come, it basically was either the 24th or Halloween, and I just didn't want to kind of impinge on my children's happiness by requiring them to observe my anniversary on Halloween. Hey, Rudy, how are you? Rudy Willis is with us. I had dinner with him and Steve Lindstrom the other night. It was really, really fun. I explained I rarely leave my house, so to actually be out somewhere with such charming gentlemen, it was great. Talking about notes, that's something I could not do if I was out with my husband right now for my anniversary. I've become very hard to date because I don't talk about anything but notes. But thank you, Sylvia.
So I was just going to start with just a quick public service announcement for people because this caught me off guard recently, and most people probably haven't heard this yet. But I was attempting to board some loans recently with Madison Management, and they are no longer accepting any new loans in the following states that I will read to everybody: Arkansas, California, Iowa, Idaho, Kentucky, Maine, Montana, Nebraska, New Hampshire, New Mexico, Oklahoma, Oregon, South Dakota, Washington, D.C., and West Virginia. So if anyone has anything in that state, most of those, a lot of people don't invest in, but I think the ones that kind of caught me off guard were Oklahoma. Yeah. Iowa was another one. That kind of caught me off guard and so forth. So people are asking what and why. I don't know. I asked Shante and I got response back licensing issues, but the way I found out about it was I was trying to board loans with them, and basically the seller sent me an email basically with the comments from Madison, and basically I replied back with 3 letters that I won't say right now. And it basically, they said, yeah, I was interested. They replied back, yeah, I was curious if you actually were aware of that. So, but
I just figured out the 3-letter thing, right? The WTF 3 letters? You were going to be too polite to say?
Yes.
Oh, yeah. That's what I'm here for. So
people
indeed.
chat and stuff saying, asking questions about it. I don't know. Basically the response I got was, let me see if I can find it.
Well, you guys already knew, right? There were states that they would not service loans in.
So the response I got was licensing issues. That's all I got, licensing issues. So I don't have anything else for you. But so with that, I took those 2 loans, and for many people that know, I've always pretty much used Madison for the most part. I used another server early on, so I am testing the waters with Allied. So we will see how it goes.
I'm already in the Allied pool, so come on in. The water's fine.
So,
They're not as staffed up as Madison, but Madison might not be that staffed up either pretty soon. They seem to be they trickled over to Nevada from New Jersey, and now it's not clear what's really happening there, but they definitely seem to be in some kind of upheaval. So they're, just to be clear, they're not deboarding, like they're not going to throw David's Nebraska.
No, if you have loans with them, they're still there, is my understanding. It just said new loans. So any loans you acquire going forward. So that's my public service.
Don't buy in the Dakotas anyway. So. Or Kentucky, good Lord.
So somebody mentioned that they were told Madison moved on paper, not physically. No, they physically moved all their accounting, and they still have a New Jersey office. But they moved because Kevin moved to Nevada. You have to have your headquarters wherever your whoever's the licensed individual within the company, which is Kevin, I believe. That's where your headquarters has to be. So no, Sylvia, they are in Nevada. Like all new payments now have to be sent to Nevada. That's right now they're still doing some of the servicing aspect of it out, and some of the accounting I believe is still done out of New Jersey, but no, they're in Nevada. So wow, I didn't think that would cause that much of a
I know, there's a hush as everyone absorbs this news. Yes. How many people are devastated to hear this? And it's going to feel like it's going to complicate your life a lot. All right, don't whine. Nobody likes a whiner, Chris.
So, no, see, everyone's calm down now.
Yeah, everyone's just getting a drink right now.
Yeah.
Okay, so we promised everyone a fright night. Our guest for tonight actually rescheduled. Oh, they're not going to throw out notes.
No.
Part with them. Now you're grandfathered in if you're already there.
Yeah.
With notes in those states. I'm trying to think if I don't think I have anything affected. I stick to the, that little glob of states: Michigan, Indiana, Ohio, not on purpose, but because we keep buying pools with Ohio in South Carolina, Mississippi, Tennessee. Yeah.
So tonight, Gail, we're going to let me vent about my Florida asset.
Yeah, and then I would like to do a little something, but you please go ahead and terrify us with the horrors of your Florida condo.
So I started these condos I bought them in March of 2018, and there was actually two of them. This one in particular had a unpaid balance of $30,000 on it, and the BPO was $40,000. And at the time, I paid $17,000, and it had about $1,500 in back taxes. So 18.5 out of 30, roughly about 57 cents on the dollar, which a little higher than I wanted to, but I thought, wasn't too bad because I was using an attorney who I was using prior in Pennsylvania, and they're licensed in both states, and basically had told me, a foreclosure in Florida is going to cost you about $5,000 to $6,000. And with it being a foreclosure, you're only responsible for 1% of the HOA fees, so of the cost. So when I ran all the numbers, like I said, I envisioned I would be in the full deal for around, after taxes and everything, for about $28,000. And with a $40,000 UPB, value, and with the area appreciating a little bit, I envisioned that I'd probably get about close to 35 to 40 for it. So I was looking at a 30% return.
So some clarifying questions. Yes. There were two in the same building, right?
Yes.
And you're just describing one.
I'm only going to talk about one.
Okay, so where in Florida was this?
Deerfield Beach.
Okay, and they're non-performing, like vacant, right?
Non-performing,
Abandoned.
vacant, borrower deceased.
Yeah, big HOA, big HOA potential liens, but you don't have to worry about that because it's,
Yep.
yeah,
Safe harbor.
yeah. Okay, okay.
So, and like you said, borrower was deceased. So I knew I wasn't going to get a fight from that standpoint.
Sometimes you do, though, right? From
Well, I hope not. Actually, Fright Nights, I did have a borrower who was deceased attempt to show up at court for a hearing earlier this month. So
it's a miracle.
that's a whole other story.
Hallelujah. Okay.
I'm digressing right now, but the email to Franco was like, I can't wait to see this borrower show up to court because he's deceased.
Yeah, do you know your biblical references? That's a Lazarus when they rise from the grave to come fight with you in court.
Yeah.
So these are not contracts for deed. These are notes.
These are notes.
Right?
So it was
Deerfield Beach, for those of us who know nothing about it.
shitty
Vibrant
area,
town, ghost town.
Shitty area on the east coast of Florida.
Okay, not a good one. It's no Miami.
No, it's north of Miami, but the interesting thing is, I had, basically some pictures that, that not from the inside, but you can peek through the windows and see. And the place, I mean, at the time, I'll get to it, but, fully renovated ones were selling for about 75 to 90. So when I was looking at 40, I was thinking, okay, put 20 grand into it. And I've been, in my area, it was 800 square feet too. So I'll give you an idea. And, 20 grand on an 800 square foot unit is a good amount of money to renovate. And I've done units that size up in DC area for 20 grand or less.
Wow.
So it gets boarded, and basically the attorney I was using, sends out the, starts the foreclosure process. And while this was going on, another investor who had JV'd with me wanted to buy their own notes. So I hooked him up with 2 notes as part of, it was like 6 assets we bought. And I hooked him up with 2 assets in Florida as well. And he had one where the borrower was deceased as well in it. And he was going through the foreclosure. So we're going like simultaneous foreclosures on these things. And, basically the, this is again, early 2018. And then, basically after the demand letter expires, ask about the foreclosure and about the case being filed. Oh yeah, case is being case being filed. I'm like, okay. I go online and, and I think it's Broward County. You can see if it's filed. I don't see anything. Oh yeah, it's filed. I'm like, okay, give me the case number. They send me a case number. It's the other condo that I had. They didn't file for both. And so it's, the WTF comes up, and they're like, well, we're waiting for you to sign this document. And I'm like, I signed that document. It was FedEx to you. Here's the FedEx, number. Here's a scanned copy of it. And here's the email from whoever this person is that works for you that acknowledged your receipt. Oh, they're not here with us anymore. So this basically costs about a month and a half. So finally it gets submitted, and then I ask for a copy of the complaint. By the way, recommendation, after your attorney submits a complaint, please ask them for a copy. They should probably give you one before they submit it, but get a copy, because lo and behold, he has my entity wrong. He has the wrong borrower on it, and basically the property address numbers were transposed. So everything that could be wrong basically was wrong.
This would be a good time to mention this is a very well-known and highly regarded attorney.
No, he's not. He's in our, like, the one attorney.
Well, I know he's on our wall of shame, but
he's on the wall of shame. But
out in the world, people are like, "Oh,
no,
big
there's
deal."
a servicer who basically uses this firm specifically. And if people
They used
name,
him. Yeah.
What's that?
You're saying they do use him.
They do. Like, if
you're proving my point that he's, accepted in the world, not by you, but others.
He's not a divorce attorney like your Pennsylvania attorney.
Yes, well,
Uh, so
that's a plus on one of the columns.
So finally, after about 6 months, things get squared away. And during this time, the other individual I was working with was already getting his dates for like foreclosure. And I'm still like, piddling along and so forth and so on. And I'm emailing him and calling him, no response. The only time I would ever get a response is when they would send you an invoice. They send an invoice with a comment like where something stands, but that is the only time they would ever respond. So after, I think it was like the second invoice, which, basically they tried to charge for like refiling a complaint and everything else, which I was like, no, I'm not paying for that. And, I was basically playing their game where I'd be like, if you want me to pay, you need to reply to my email, because the only time you reply is when you send me a bill. So this is how the game works, I guess. I can get pretty nasty in that way when people tick me off. So, and the interesting story about this whole note is it's not about the borrower, and that's the whole thing about, we're talking about these fright nights. This has nothing to do with the borrower is dead. And so, there's nothing.
That's the lowest maintenance type of borrower you can have.
So finally, this spring, fast forward, after about $9,000 in legal bills, because this attorney basically kept saying, well, it's Florida, this and that.
Dragged it out and dragged
it out and everything else. We finally get to foreclosure. So we get to foreclosure, and actually somebody bid at foreclosure and won it at foreclosure. But guess what? They didn't close. So what's the attorney do? Slaps me with another bill on the foreclosure for like $2,000. Which didn't go over well, let's say the least. So essentially I fired them.
Yeah, what was $2,000 for what?
For basically for them, because we had to redo the foreclosure. Well, they had to redo the sale. So
the sale part of foreclosure.
Yep. So they had to republish it and everything else, and they're putting their own fees in it and stuff like that. And I was like, no. I'm like, I am done. So I called up Beth Cruikshank, and she's like, really, nothing needs to be done with this. I'm like, exactly. I'm firing them and hiring you. So Beth ended up redoing the foreclosure, and I ended up getting the property back. Woohoo, finally. And we had gone in there actually because, borrower had been deceased, and there had been the hot water heater had let go. So there had been some, in the kitchen, there was some damage that the drywall was cut out, and the cabinets were original. And I envisioned about $12,000 is what I budgeted for. Every number I got from people was 40,000 plus. And I was laughing. I'm like, this is literally insane. And they're like, it's because of the HOA. And not is there one HOA, there's 3 HOAs. There's the HOA for the building. Then within this community, there's separate communities. So there was a community one. And then there's also a amenities HOA. So we'll get to that.
Okay.
We'll get to that in a minute. So I actually have an agent who, she was awesome. Her name's Wendy Davis, Wendi. And we had already gone and sold the first one, and that one went pretty well. So on this one, I get a full price offer. So I listed it for 39,000 is what we ended up listing it for, because I just wanted to dump them. At the time, I'm in them for like 31. So I'm not making, at the end of the day, I'm not making money on this. I mean, that's just a given at this point in time. And because between the closing fees, the realtor, and the HOA, which it's the 1% rule, we're arguing whether it's total or for each HOA, and they were fighting it, and it's not worth fighting it. I mean, at the end of the day, for an extra $600, it would cost me more in legal fees to fight it. So put on the market, and we get a cash offer, pretty much full price. It might have been like $500 under full price. I'm like, this awesome, good. Let's get rid of it. Let's sell it. The buyer is in the UK. So, but she had like a family member here. So fills out all the
Say
paperwork.
that's why she was willing to buy one in Deerfield Beach. Yep. So, she just thought, Florida, how bad could it be?
Fills out all the paperwork, so forth, so on. And, getting ready, going to closing, my agent goes, well, she needs to get approved by the HOA. I'm like, okay, that's not a big deal. I mean, cash buyer stuff and, and so forth. Well, the HOA decides that they make up their rules as they go. These are not written rules. They're making them up as they go. So their new rule was that you have to have a 700 credit score. And because they're concerned that a borrower will default like the ones that in the past, and they have no recourse. In my first
Did he default or did he just die?
She died. Yeah. Okay. So sorry. Exactly. But my point, so I'm like, well, if they're paying cash, you are basically, there's no lien on the property. So
what does their credit score matter?
Yeah. What's credit score matter? Well, the United States is really like the only country that has credit scores. So
another bonus of living here.
So we have the guy on the phone and say, so ask him, well, it's like, so when did this come in? Well, it's, they wouldn't give us the rules and regs. They wouldn't give us anything in writing. So I get him on the phone and, I take the Merrill Chandler thing. So I start asking him, well, is it a FICO 3B, a 3A? Start rolling out like a FICO, all these FICO numbers. And the guy's like, I don't know what you're talking about. And I'm like, exactly. I said, you come up with a number of 700, but it's arbitrary. I'm like, do you have a 700 credit score? Well, he admitted he didn't. Okay.
So he's missed a few payments on something as well.
It gets better. So the woman, as part of it, you have to submit a financial statement. And the woman has, I think it was like $300,000, 300,000 euros, I should say, sitting in the bank. Okay. Wow. And it's like, okay, this woman's paying cash. She has this much money sitting aside. What is the problem? So they basically were like, nope, we're not approving her. So they refused to approve her. And I'm going like berserk because it's like you can't make up shit as you go and pick who you want and not want. So
plus in Florida, I mean, and any kind of resort state in, well, let's face it, like all over America, foreigners buy real estate. Yes. Florida is a real hotspot for that. Mm-hmm. So I can't imagine this is really the first time someone without a FICO score has, looked to buy that.
One other thing I'll add, it was a 55 plus community. So that also, they made up the new rules that are not written that you can't use them as rentals either. So it's a new rule as well. So they're literally like making up rules for people as they go.
Writing them on napkins in the elevator on the way.
But the one right next to us is a rental.
Exactly. Does that belong to someone on the board or something? Like, how does that happen?
Yeah, it's so it gets better. It gets better. So we have a second offer come in that is by, I believe it's a husband and wife couple that we're going to do owner financing. And they were going to put $15,000 down and finance $25,000 at a 5-year balloon. But they didn't have a 700 credit score. So what they do is they have somebody else they know also added to the loan that had a 702 credit score. Okay. Yeah. So so I was using Rusty Underwriter to get these people qualified. So we're going through the qualification process, and we hit a snag because they were all self-employed, and none of them could provide, or none of them ever provided any ITIN or EIN numbers. So we were on the phone with their attorney because they didn't speak English and trying to get all this information, and they provide some.
Where were they from? So they live in
Um,
America, but they're
what's
from,
that?
where were they from that they don't speak English? Yeah.
They spoke Spanish. I'm not sure home country, but so they really couldn't provide any, documentation. So one of them did end up providing their 2 years of tax statements that they had provided, but at the end of the day, because they couldn't provide any of the information, this dragged on for like a month and a half. But there's two reasons why. So we're trying to get them approved. Finally, they're like, you know what? We're just going to pay cash. After we kept pushing, like, no, you need to provide us your social security number, ITIN, something that they wouldn't provide. So during this time, one of the three HOAs switched management companies. And so they had gone to an interview with one of the management companies, but they're no longer the new management company. So they had to go through another interview. And they just took their sweet old time. They finally get it done. But the HOA company that rejected the first people, basically, the other thing they did during the first interview, they did do the first person with the first interview. They were telling them that, oh yeah, your unit has mold and all this other things. And, basically like, so after I'd heard that, my agent was going to, ask her to go to the second one too. This one with this new borrower, because this HOA is just out of control. So
each of your buyers has to be interviewed individually by all three.
So the first cash buyer did had a representative there for an interview, but then they rejected her because she didn't have the 700. So this group had to go, and we told them, make sure your attorney's there because they didn't speak English. But basically, when we were going through at the time, we were talking about the it's a time we're still going back and forth whether they were going to get financing or pay cash. So basically, and there's letter that if they provide this information, then they meet Dodd-Frank requirements for getting financing. The HOA is like, well, we don't care what Dodd-Frank says. They don't meet our requirements for getting financing. And basically, we don't think they're qualified enough. So they have their own qualification limits for what borrowers should and shouldn't be qualified to pay for their mortgage. It's amazing. But they were still going back and forth on cash. And basically, it almost like forced them to pay cash on the deal. So we went back to the HOA and said, if they pay cash, will they be approved? Well, the treasurer comes back and says, we have some questions on their tax returns. We think there's some issues with their tax returns and how they were, basically like the numbers on their tax returns. And it's like, it's a submitted tax return to the IRS. Now you're basically like,
you're an IRS auditor.
So I told my agent that, I called another attorney, and because, and I love Beth, but, Beth is very good at handling certain aspects. But in this instance, I was looking for more of a heavy hitter type attorney.
Killer. Yeah.
Killer.
Back them down.
So what you were thinking? So I reached out to Aaron Quinn and kind of like via Facebook and said, hey, I get the impression from Erin that she can, she packs a little punch. I've never used her before. I can just by her comments. So basically said, hey, I may need your help. She's like, just let me know if you need me. Cause, and I finally got to the point where I told my agent, I said, um, call the president and basically tell him that, yes, I'm pretty much almost threatening them, but I'm not, that if this borrower isn't approved because of something that they say is like, they meet Dodd-Frank, but not the HOA. It's,
Arbitrary.
I
Yeah.
said, yeah, something arbitrary. I am going to sue them, and I'm going to sue the HOA, and I'm going to sue them personally.
Mm-hmm.
And like, HOAs, should have, limits in regards to, doing background checks on, you know, criminal or whatever past and stuff. But, basically if, you can't, if you took this and, somebody tried to do this in an area, a high minority area, um, it would be all over the news. Basically, what
Oh
they're
yeah.
trying to do.
Totally.
I mean, it's
Yes.
ridiculous of basically like, you know, what they were trying to do and the power. And it was just unbelievable. So, long story short, this past
Too late
Tuesday,
for that.
yes, this past Tuesday, which was the 22nd. So basically it was about 20 months later. We sold, but I did knock the price down because of cash, because I was like, just get rid of it. So I ended up selling it for like 36, but after everything, I netted like 29, which I'd already paid off my JV because they wanted out like 4 months ago and we weren't making any money. So I'm like, I'll just buy it out now and end up giving them their money back plus a return. So I end up losing about $3,000 in the deal, but it's one that I am just so glad to get out of. And it's wanted to use this as an example because we've shared stories like Chad, who's I think on tonight, shared a story about his borrower and the type of condition of the property and things. These fright nights can be more than just a borrower or a property. It's dealing, and Chad had it too. He was dealing with a local jurisdiction. This one's with an HOA, that they can really make your life pretty miserable.
Yes. So Sylvia is asking, what would you do differently next time? In due diligence, or just avoid condos completely?
No, I mean, I wouldn't avoid condo. I don't know what I would do differently, honestly.
That's the scary part. There isn't anything
Well, I
you
mean,
can
at the time
know
when I
for
bought
sure.
it, there were rentals in the building. Okay. The HOA regs, actually, I had pulled a copy up online, but if you got a board that basically makes up their own rules,
Mhm.
I mean, it's like saying, I don't, buying in a certain jurisdiction, you have an inspector that makes up the rules like Chad. He had one where basically they're making up the rules as they go and didn't notify him in writing and basically making him jump through hoops on things. There's not much you can do.
Mhm.
Um, so from that perspective, and Christina asked about HOAs having so much rights. No, I mean they don't. But if you've ever, a lot of HOAs um, are people who the presidents of HOAs, and I'm gonna kind of stereotype this, which I probably shouldn't do.
Oh, go ahead.
But a lot of presidents of HOAs are people who have never been in an authority or power position, and they just take it to the far extreme. Like they literally are the president of the United States, and just can do whatever they want.
Yeah, I think we've all met in different aspects of life people who are drunk with power, in
Yeah.
some, minor position, but one that where they can really interfere with people.
Yeah. So, but at the end of the day, the funniest part of this whole story was the guy who paid cash isn't even the guy who's living in it. And, basically, honestly, I think barely had a pot to piss in, where you got somebody over in Europe with more money than they know what to do with isn't qualified. It just blows my mind.
Yeah, weren't you at one of your most frustrating moments talking about like donating it to be like a halfway house for drug addicts or something? So they could all live there.
I was getting to the point of calling like the Deerfield, city of Deerfield Beach, yeah, seeing if like something like that could be happening, just to really get these, get the HOA, like, really rolling now, donate it to like low income or affordable housing.
You have them begging you to bring that first buyer back.
Yeah. So
So was it actually did Erin actually quasi threaten them, or it did not go that far? Like
it
they
didn't
did.
have to go that far. My agent basically, I think, she was, so I'm kind of like I get too passionate sometimes about things, and I need sometimes to be calmed down. So she was perfect. She would be like, Chris, calm down, it's okay, I'll talk to them, and stuff. And she smoothed it over. But I think she also can be stern, so I think she was, she told me, she reached out to them and said, if you really need to be careful what you're doing, or you're really going to start running into some serious problems. So
Yeah, I barely have this guy under control.
yeah. So
well, congratulations.
so that's my Florida story for you. The first one, actually, in there, we didn't have any problems with that. I mean, that one was weird. That one was like smooth cash buyer. That one really didn't need any work. And that one basically foreclosed. The other thing with the attorney too, I'll mention. I literally had put in like 40 font in an email to them: when these go to foreclosure sale, do not sell them on the same date, because why would you want two condos in the same complex? Because if there's somebody who wanted, two people wanted one, they just one pick the other, versus bidding against each other. And I literally, I put it in 40-point font, in bold, like, and it was actually attached to an invoice that he sent back that I put in the heading. I said, question about invoice, because that's the only way I know they would actually read it. And lo and behold, when the foreclosure sale came, guess what it was?
Two up for sale.
Both of them were up for sale on the same date. So
okay, so Sylvia says congratulations, even though you lost $3,000.
Yes. So
it was a win, really. We have to agree.
I ended up breaking even, because on the first one, actually no, on the first one I didn't make 3,000. So on the first one I didn't make anything, because I gave all the money to the JV, because we made like $1,800 on that one or something. So yeah.
Okay. Well,
what would happen if someone bought an auction with? So that's the wonderful thing, is if they would have bought it at auction, they would not have needed, basically the HOA approval. Because, it's like, I mean, I foreclosed on it. I'm the owner. I mean, they can't,
good strategy.
Yeah. So Cody mentioned squatters are fun. Yes, Cody, we're actually mentioning that. If I don't know, do we want to see if Cody wants to hop on and tell us his Fright Night squatter story? Cody, if you're around, we'll pull you on and gladly have you tell us that story if you're interested, because I think that's the one with the dog on the front porch chained up.
I worry about that dog.
He said he can do that. Okay. Let me see here. Promote Cody. Let's see.
Hey, can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
Good. Can't see me at all, but that's probably a good thing. It's been one of those kind of long days.
I can, hold on. We're making you co-host.
There we go. I should go put a shirt on.
Ladies, it's our night.
So anyway, yeah, I have this this fun little house in Detroit, Michigan, and it's got a lot of twists and turns in it. It is really kind of a fright night kind of story. You know, we bought the note, geez, quite a while back, and it we found out that the owner of it was actually deceased, so that was kind of hard for them to reply to our demand letters. But I also found later that the son was living in the property. And so, you know, he contacted me one time after the foreclosure and asked if I wanted to buy the redemption rights, because in Michigan, they got a 6-month redemption. And then in talking with my attorney, and I found out that heirs really don't have, the redemption rights don't really transfer to heirs. And so he really couldn't make that offer to me. So I was trying to get in touch with him to do a cash for keys. But he never would contact me. So in what was it, in January of last year, 2019, after going through a long, drawn out, frozen kind of eviction process, he finally vacated the property, but also took with him the hot water heater, the furnace, and even the kitchen sink. And so
the proverbial kitchen.
Exactly, it was gone. And so we didn't know. So that's eviction number one. Okay. And so, I didn't really know that was going on until I finally got, you know, I'd listed it with the real estate agent. They had an offer on it. We accepted the offer. They made a decision. They wanted to go do a walkthrough after, you know, after they made we accepted the offer. And they came back wanting to reduce the price by $7,500 because they didn't have the hot water heater, the furnace, the kitchen sink, and some plumbing, a couple of other things. And I'm going, well, no, I don't think I want to do that. So we rejected that $7,500, and I initiated a insurance claim. And went through the insurance claim. It looked like it was going good. And then after they came back and added up all the depreciation and all the other things, the cost, I got a grand total check of $123 on my insurance claim. Now, then they told me, that, well, you know, if you replace those items and keep all the receipts and we reinspect, you know, then we'll reimburse you for that at a later date. So we'll update what the claim was. And so I contacted the agent, because this is, you know, this house is a $25,000 house, $27,000 house. And I said, if we go back in and put all this money back into it, I mean, are we going to recover that cost? And he basically said, no, you're not going to in this particular neighborhood at this particular price range. So we elected not to do that, and, you know, marketed it through the spring, got another offer as is in June. There we go. I finally hit the right button. And so we got an offer on that in June, and accepted the offer, and they wanted to do a walkthrough before, no. Oh, the agent was going to go through there to check on things, and she emailed me and says, so what's this dog you got in the backyard there? I go, what dog? And they said, it's kind of a mean looking dog. And I said, I have no idea what dog that is. And she says, okay, well, we'll coordinate with the animal group there in Detroit, and we'll get that thing taken out. So they showed up to do that, determined that dog belonged to the new resident in the house, that I had no idea there was a squatter in the house at that point in time. And apparently this guy is pretty adamant that he owns the house. And so I then, you know, posted on one of the Facebook Michigan note or real estate pages that I need some help getting this guy out of the house, because apparently in Detroit, they have a squatter's law that says if somebody shows up to the house, calls 911, the police will rapidly respond and help you remove this guy. I just had to make sure I had my proof of ownership to them, which I did. So I got one guy, I sent him $100 to do that. He went out to the house probably a half dozen times, called the cops, and they never showed up. And so finally he got tired of it. For his offer, I let him keep the $100. And then I contacted somebody else who was a property manager there, and she said that that she could do the same thing, and she had other ways that she could get people out. So I thought that was interesting enough. So
that's a phrase to pay attention to.
Well,
Exactly.
actually, I learned some of those other ways, and I can't repeat it because you're probably recording. So,
Yes, we are.
Yeah,
They're not your ways, Cody.
I thought that probably this mortgage note investor from Oregon probably shouldn't get involved in those kind of folks. So she went out there at least a half dozen times, maybe even more, and the same thing. So finally, I called in for about the fourth or fifth time to the City of Detroit 9th Precinct and talked to the desk sergeant. The first time I talked to him, he said, "Hey, this is Detroit. We've got murders and robberies and other things going on. We're not really into this eviction thing." That's great. And so then I got a hold of another guy, Sergeant Wade. Sergeant Wade promised me that they would respond if I had somebody out there. But of course, they got out there, made the 911 call, and nobody showed up. So finally, the gal that I had hired for the $75, she made me an offer that I refused. And then she went down to the precinct and talked to somebody directly. And they basically said, okay, send them all the paperwork. So I sent them all the paperwork of the, my LLC and the deed that took me in the title and all the eviction stuff from the first eviction. And they said, oh, well, we can't have somebody that isn't part of your company represent you for one of these type of evictions. And so, I wasted basically from June all the way till, end of September, following the instructions given to me by the City of Detroit to no avail, another $175 out the window, which wasn't too bad. I guess I can count that as tuition. And then we finally, they told me that I had to go through the legal stuff. So I basically had to call up the same attorney that helped me with the first eviction to get this guy out. And hopefully they can get his dog out as well. But I've got to be thinking this guy's been in the house probably since, May or June or something like that, with no water, no heater, no kitchen sink. I shudder to think what inside that house might look like at this point in time. But interesting enough, the guys that have, signed the offer to buy the house from me are still interested. The list, although that purchase agreement is expired, the listing agreement is expired. So I'm just kind of waiting now. We're about 2 weeks into the real court eviction, and I'm waiting for them to schedule an eviction date. So, it just kind of goes on and on and on. All for, a nice little home, probably one of the nicest little homes on the block. It's only worth $25,000 to $27,000, but I just can't get that thing sold. So yeah, hopefully something happens quickly.
And what's going to happen, Cody?
No,
it's wintertime now, so they're not going to want to evict a person.
Yeah. So,
well, there's no heat on, so there isn't a huge difference between being inside or outside.
It's just the fact. I've got one right now up in Wisconsin that people haven't paid in I don't know how long, and every week we keep hearing that because we've got the forfeiture that sheriff's going out to do the lockout, and hasn't gone out. And this one's a little unfortunate in some sense because I think the borrowers may have got some bad information from one of these housing counselors, because the property was originally a Vision property, and Vision basically got thrown out of Wisconsin, and they're thinking, well, Vision owned this, so basically I get a free house from it, is kind of what I think was sold to them. And it's like, no, you don't get a free house.
So I'm waiting to hear back from the attorney, and it's about time for me to do my weekly follow-up with him.
So do you have your order of eviction and you're just waiting for the sheriff, or you don't have
we're waiting for it to be scheduled in the court, so we don't quite have that quite yet.
So who's the person that's living in the house?
I have no clue. No idea whatsoever.
I was going to say, have you tried to send somebody, offer him $200 or something?
We've done all that, and apparently he likes the house. So maybe I should sell it on with seller financing to him.
Think you qualify?
Where'd I read Where did I read somewhere online that a guy put an offer in on a house that was listed for 300 for like $90,000 and it got rejected. So he kept putting the offer in and they just kept ignoring him. So the house was vacant. So he went in, he moved in, and like the neighbors thought he bought it. So they're like helping him move, and he was like renovating the house and stuff like that. And finally someone's like, talked to the owners and, noticed it was still for sale. And he's like, somebody's like living there and stuff. And they end up arresting the guy and stuff like that. And,
well, I hope that,
from out that day.
I hope that's what happens on this one here. And
I
I
hope he's
hope somebody
renovating.
catches it on video. So, yeah.
He's
So
already done a whole new bathroom for you, I'm sure.
Well, yeah, I hope so. Well, in some ways I hope so. In some ways, I don't even want to see it.
Yeah, you're gonna need one.
So that's it, guys. That's my story. I'm sticking with it, and I'll follow up with you guys when we finally have some success on that, just so we can close it out.
So, Cody, a few quick questions on this one.
Yeah.
So when did you originally buy the asset? Out of curiosity.
Oh, I think it was like summer of 18, somewhere in there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So. Well, actually, no. We foreclosed on it in May of 2018 and had to wait the obligatory 6-month redemption period, which expired in October of last year. And that's when I had to start the eviction process to get the son out. So that's kind of what the time frame was.
Yeah.
So,
okay. So
it seems like it was February of last year of 2018 is when we actually bought the note.
Yeah.
Now I think about it.
So goes back a ways.
Yeah.
But yeah. And fortunately, this is, I have an investor on this one, and it's like I hear you guys talk a lot on your podcast when you're working with investors, even if things are not going the way that you had thought it was going to keep in contact with these guys. Just tell them what's going on. Just that communication, even though you may have nothing new to tell them from what you told them 2 weeks ago, just keep talking with them, tell them what's going on, and they have an understanding of it. So that's what I've been doing with this guy. We talk all the time, and he's even saying, well, let's get this thing done because I want to do something new with you. And so, I mean, that's kind of refreshing in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
It really goes to show when you communicate with people that you're looking out for their best interest, but also the fact that you're handling the situation properly. It's something that you really can't control, but you're communicating with somebody and just giving them the news, what's good and bad. I've got a partner right now on a property that has just been overly challenging, that she said she was going to sign a cash for keys deal. She didn't. And my JV partner, basically, we've been in this deal so long, he started his own note business and has bought probably like 10 notes now. And, it's funny because he asked me, he goes, how do I pay a JV partner? Because that's something that you never showed me.
I've never been paid. Where's the role modeling now, Christopher?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Yep.
All right, group. Well, I'm going to sign off for now. Thanks for having me on for a few minutes. And so Sunday, just to let you know, Sunday, again, I leave for the National Mortgage Bankers Association annual convention. And so that's in Austin. And so we'll see how all that goes.
Good.
Well, get a little warm weather in.
Yeah, it was 78 there today. So
nice.
Well, thank you, Cody.
All right, guys. Best to you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay, let me switch. Okay.
So, I don't know if I should. I also finally was released from the bondage of a terrible property this week. I've talked about this property a lot. My property in Pennsylvania that I bought in my IRA when I was just a little baby note investor. And I knew it was a horrible note, but I kind of talked myself into it because it's in a great rental area near me. Plus, I was new and I thought, well, this looks like it will be really terrible, but let me give it a whirl and see how it goes. And yes, that's the one that I have the divorce attorney doing the foreclosure, as you have chuckled so many times, Chris. So this guy, on top of the property being horrible and my attorney being horrible, this was the borrower that declared bankruptcy 7 times in 6 years. So, there were so many things that I didn't know back then that would have been such gigantic red flags to me now. But it finally came to a close, and I actually lost $11,000, which is a personal record for me. I had the option of staying in it to try to do something so I wouldn't lose the money, try to find a seller financed buyer and then, resell the note and all these things. But the situation is that I want the money. I wanted the cash out of it in order to be able to do some rental deals. I don't know why I said rental deals, because there isn't enough cash to even do one rental deal. So it's like wishful thinking. But we actually spoke on a previous podcast about taking a loss and how, there's a lot of things, we all hate the idea, and it wounds our pride, and it, puts you in a bad position with an investor to have to tell them that, we're not only not making any profit on it, but we're taking a little bit of a bath on it as well. I was relieved in this case that it was in my IRA, so I'm the only one taking the bath. But the thing is, like, when you look at a situation that is losing money, like, in order for me to try to make or even break even on this, I would have either had to find a seller financed buyer, or I would have had to renovate the property in order to sell it and break even. And this particular township, Norristown, Pennsylvania, everyone beware. There are other places like this on planet Earth. Anderson, Indiana is another one. Like, these look like really, there's always deals in these places, particularly Anderson. And it looks like, Anderson has pretty high rents, if you end up owning a property there. So it kind of looks like you can't go wrong. But Norristown, PA, and Anderson, Indiana have one very important thing in common. They have municipal authorities who are very much like Chris's HOAs. They are ruthless. They are ruthless and difficult. And even though this property was a total blight on the community and something they knew at the code enforcement office, they knew this property really well. And it's like we all had a shared interest in getting it, up and running, rehabbed, occupied, and off the, stop just being a problem for everybody. And yet, even though we're all on the same team in that sense, they gave me so much grief about every single thing, about even just trying to sell this thing at a loss, that I knew there was no way I wanted to renovate with people like that. Anderson, Indiana, same thing. I sold a house that I took back in a cash for keys. It was a contract for deed. I sold it to a young military guy who's buying a lot. And, I feel bad now, because now that he's trying to renovate it, I'm really seeing what they're putting him through. These kind of classic catch-22s where, you can't turn the power on until it's, everything is fixed by a licensed electrician, but a licensed electrician isn't allowed to go in there because of something else. And it's horrible. So I feel like this is our next list, Chris, is like these don't go there communities that everyone needs to realize. Terrible.
Well, I think it would be worthwhile to start bringing on some agents and people we may have worked with in certain communities, and again, they can't, or property managers maybe, because I know agents can't speak really to
trash the communities.
Yeah, they can't trash it. Where property managers, I think, can, because they're not licensed in the sense like a realtor is, to tell you that basically that neighborhood you'll get gunned down in or something. But we should bring in maybe certain investors or specialists in certain areas where a lot of us invest potentially. And if people have ideas or topics, we'd be happy to bring them on and maybe have them on either Thursday night or just on a regular episode. People, because I know a lot of people, out in the Indianapolis area, there's a lot of investors just in Indiana in general, and then same thing in Michigan, in Detroit, Flint, and some of those areas. Jackson, I think Mississippi, and some areas of Missouri, Alabama.
Yeah, St.
Some
Louis,
areas.
for
Yep.
sure.
So.
Yeah. So I just want to make this point about taking a loss. Like, yes, it's very hard. And if this had happened to me earlier in my career, I would have probably gone to bed for a week about it. But, given the choice of like having to spend a ton of money and time renovating this in order to break even, or having the velocity of money of being able to take what I could get from it and recycle that money into a new deal that will, make me money faster and get me whole faster. Like, I took the loss. And I think people really should, I'm sure everyone's like knee-jerk reaction is, no, I'm not going to take a loss. But I have now begun to understand the wisdom of it at times.
I'm a cut the cord guy. If it's.
I am scared to death of the misstep that I will take, and Chris will just be like, Gail, I'm sorry, that was your last farewell.
Like, I got a property right now in Montana that, basically the poor guy who did the clean out, but the property as is like, 50,000, it's a good deal for me, but they're like, well, if you put 25 into it, you might be able to get another 20 something. I'm like, it's Montana. We're entering the winter. I'll never get this thing finished. I'm like, I'd rather just take the money now and, not have to take the risk, because it's a hot area for investors, and a lot of them are looking for places to put their cash at the end of the year. So, for me, it's I'd much rather just exit the property than trying to renovate from afar, because I tried it once and failed miserably.
Yes, don't remind me. I suffered with your.
So we did have a question, Gail, that did come through. Yes, Gail did sell that property. So
I did. I just sold it this past Monday, and it was glorious. So
okay.
Yeah. So I'm buying rentals now in the place where I buy them. I can be all in on a house for $33,000 that will rent for $750 to $800. So I took away from that settlement like $17,000. So I'm just working my way up to another rental on that.
Good.
So.
Okay. Any other questions, people out there? Comments? Anything before we wrap up this episode? While we do wait for comments, as always, if people could leave us feedback on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play. Is it Blueberry or Burberry? I don't even know. There's another one like that as well. Whatever, wherever you're listening, leave us a review.
Right. And remember, we're not going to be here next week. It is Halloween. So please go out and trick or treat safely. And remember, you're never too old to trick or treat. You're just running the risk of being arrested for being out there with all the children. Be careful.
Well, Gail, I think we've answered everyone's questions. So if that is all, we again like to thank everyone for joining us on this episode of the Good Deeds No Investing podcast. And as always, we recommend you go out and do some good deeds.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.